Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Senate Committee on Judiciary and Public Policy. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Chairman Lucido.
Here.
Senator Vanderwall.
Present.
Senator Barrett.
Here.
Senator Johnson. Here. Senator Runstead.
Here.
Senator Chang.
Here.
Senator Irwin.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have 7 members present. There is a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It looks like we don't have to excuse any members because we're all here, and that's great. But we do have a motion by Senator Vanderwall to adopt the minutes from the December 11, 2019 committee hearing. Seeing no objections, the minutes are so adopted. Note that there was testimony, everyone, that was received on Senate Bill 68 and House Bills 5117 and 5118 during the previous committee hearings. Today, we have some substituted versions that need to be adopted for each of these bills. We'll start off with Senate Bill 68, Senator Wayno's bill. And do we have a motion to adopt a substitute? We do by Senator Chang. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Lucido.
Yes.
Senator Vanderwall.
Yes.
Senator Barrett.
Yes.
Senator Johnson. Yes. Senator Runstead.
Yes.
Senator Chang.
Yes.
Senator Irwin.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, on the motion to adopt the S1 version of Senate Bill 68, there are 7 yeas, 0 nays. The substitute is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Clerk. Assume the chair. Next, we're going to take House Bill 5117 to adopt a substitute for Rep. Bolden's bill. Do we have a motion at this time? Senator Chang. Thank you, Senator Chang. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chairman Lucido.
Yes.
Senator Vanderwall.
Yes.
Senator Barrett.
Yes.
Senator Johnson.
Yes.
Senator Runstead.
Yes.
Senator Chang.
Yes.
Senator Irwin.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, on the motion to adopt the S1 version of House Bill 5117, there are 7 yeas, 0 nays. The substitute is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Clerk. Next, we're going to take a motion to adopt House Bill substitute for 4118 by Rep. Calley.
That was a clerk error. It's 5118.
Apologize. Thank you for catching that. Next, we'll take a motion to adopt a substitute for House Bill 5118. So moved by Senator Vanderwall. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chairman Lucido.
Yes.
Senator Vanderwall.
Yes.
Senator Barrett.
Yes.
Senator Johnson. Senator Runstead.
Yes.
Senator Chang.
Yes.
Senator Irwin. Mr. Chair, on the motion to adopt the S1 version of House Bill 5118, there are 7 yeas, 0 nays. The substitute is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Now we need to vote these out, but before we do, we have some cards. Madam Clerk, would you please read in the cards?
Mr. Chairman, all of the cards are relative to Senate Bill 68, House Bill 5117, and House Bill 5118. Not wishing to speak in support of the bills, Peter Cunningham, representing the State Bar of Michigan. Not wishing to speak in support of all of the bills, Megan Richardson, Michigan Innocence Clinic. Not wishing to speak in support of all of the bills, John Cooper, representing Safe and Just Michigan. And the last card, not wishing to speak in support of the bills, Noah Smith, representing Criminal Defense Attorneys of Michigan. That is all the cards, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any committee members have any questions before we so move to vote? Seeing none, I'll take a motion on Senate Bill 68 with the substitute 1 to go to the floor with recommendation that the bill does so pass. Thank you, Senator Chang. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chairman Lucido.
Yes.
Senator Vanderwall.
Yes.
Senator Barrett.
Yes.
Senator Johnson.
Yes.
Senator Runstead.
Yes.
Senator Chang.
Yes.
Senator Irwin.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, on the motion to report Senate Bill 68 S1, there are 7 yeas, 0 nays. The bill is reported.
And I'll move at this time to recommend immediate effect for Senate Bill 68 with the S1 without objection. The motion passed. Next, we're going to take a vote to report out House Bill 5117 with the substitute to the floor with recommendation that the bill then does pass. I have a motion from Senator Irwin. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Chairman Lucido.
Yes.
Senator Vanderwall.
Yes.
Senator Barrett.
Yes.
Senator Johnson.
Yes.
Senator Runstead.
Yes.
Senator Chang.
Yes.
Senator Irwin. Mr. Chairman, on the motion to report House Bill 5117, the S1 version, there are 7 yeas, 0 nays. The bill is reported.
And at this time, I move to recommend immediate effect without objection. House Bill 5117 with the S1 is given immediate effect. Last bill we're going to be taking for the vote this morning is House Bill 5118. I will now entertain a motion to report House Bill 5118 with the S1 to the floor with the recommendation that the bill does so pass. Senator Vanderwall, thank you for the motion. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Chairman, Senator Vanderwall.
Yes.
Senator Barrett.
Yes.
Senator Johnson.
Yes.
Senator Irwin. Mr. Chairman, on the motion to report House Bill 5118, that's one version, there are 7 yeas, 0 nays. The bill is reported.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I move to recommend immediate effect for House Bill 5118 with the S1 without objection. So ordered. Thank you, members. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And today, members, we have a presentation from the Michigan State Police regarding the Data Master validation issues. Today, you should have in front of you, there's 2 letters. One is dated January 10, 2020, and the other one's dated is the official statement from the Michigan State Police dated January 13th, 3 days later, 2020. At this time, I would like to welcome Colonel Joseph Jasper, as well as Michael Nichols, as well as Patrick Reynolds. What do they call this again, Madam Clerk? Testimony table. Welcome, gentlemen.
We have 2 chairs and 3 people. This is the citizens.
You're welcome to pull up a chair.
Pull up a chair.
Oh, we have it right here for
Here we go. Thanks, Sarge. Can you kind of fit it in the middle because we have microphones? We want everybody to hear. Thank you very much. Members of the committee, these 2 letters are very important for you to discern while the testimony is given, but at this time, I would like to welcome Senator Jasper, Colonel Jasper. Not yet. Colonel, good morning. Welcome to the committee. Would you begin the testimony?
Thank you for asking me here today.
Can you pull the mic a little closer? Sorry to interrupt you, but we want to hear you.
Thank you. The issue that I'm here to discuss is one of great importance, and I want to assure you that I understand the gravity of this situation, and I am completely committed to partnering with all of our stakeholders to rectify the situation as quickly as possible and to work to restore the public's faith. The people will receive the due process that they deserve from our criminal justice system. I'd like to start by giving a very brief overview of how we got to where we are today and to provide some updated and new information not previously shared. On September 1st of 2018, the MSP entered into a 3-year, $1.26 million contract with Intoximeters Incorporated to service and maintain the state's 203 Data Master DMT evidential breath alcohol testing instruments. This is the instrument that you see here before you, to my right, to your left. It is not the roadside portable breath test, which is known as the PBT, which is the smaller instrument on the other side of the Data Master. The contract requires the vendor's 3 technicians to conduct the 120-day certifications of all instruments, perform service calls and routine maintenance, and provide court testimony on the service and maintenance of the instruments. On January 2nd of this year, during a routine audit of documents submitted by the vendor for the prior 2-week period, MSP staff noticed an irregularity on an instrument at the Alpena County Sheriff's Department, and we immediately requested the original documents from the technician. With this information, we immediately opened a criminal investigation into possible forgery of a public document. This investigation is ongoing. The next day, we worked with DTMB Central Procurement to issue a stop work order with the vendor and secure all equipment and paperwork from the 3 technicians. On Friday, January 10th, we finalized an emergency plan to immediately bring all maintenance responsibilities for the state's 203 instruments in-house and notified our public safety partners of the stop work order and our new responsibilities. MSP personnel continued through the weekend to review records from the technicians, yielding additional discrepancies involving a second technician and 3 more impacted instruments located at Beverly Hills Police Department, Pittsfield Township Police Department, and Tecumseh Police Department, in which we suspect instrument calibration tests were again fabricated. Armed with this new information, we made the extreme move to remove all 203 instruments from service until they could be inspected by MSP personnel and verified to be properly calibrated. Notification was again made to our law enforcement partners, at which time we recommended that police agencies utilize blood draws rather than breath tests to establish evidence of drunk driving during this interim period. We are still in the process of reviewing vendor records and will be for some time, but possible discrepancies have been identified to date involving 8 instruments, impacting a total of 52 drunk driving cases. The breakdown of these cases is included in the documents that you were provided. The MSP is working as expeditiously as possible to review additional vendor records to identify any other potentially impacted instruments. At this time, we have no reason to believe that these issues predate the employment of these 2 technicians, who were hired in September and November of 2018. We are also aggressively working to bring instruments back into service as quickly and as efficiently as possible. As of this morning, we have certified 37 instruments. Our plan of attack is to recertify the most frequently used instruments and those in areas with limited access to obtaining blood samples first. Senator, as a longtime attorney, you are keenly aware that breath test results, while relied upon heavily for prosecution, are not required. In many cases, there is other evidence of intoxication and impairment, such as observed driving, sobriety tests, and witness observations that provide indications of drunk driving. I in no way want to diminish the role of the breath test, as we are very confident a properly calibrated and maintained data master is an extremely reliable instrument. But every drunk driving case presents a unique set of facts, making it difficult to say that all or even most drunk driving convictions or pleas are now in question. I want to emphasize that we are committed to conducting a thorough and complete investigation into this matter, and if we can prove criminal acts occurred, we will pursue criminal charges against those responsible. I have personally spoken to the Attorney General, who has pledged the full support of her office on both the criminal and civil fronts. In consultation with the AG's office and DTMB, we will aggressively pursue any redress available to the department, including possible legal action against the vendor to recoup the costs borne by the state. As I wrap up my initial remarks, I want to recognize the substantial impact that this situation has on everyone in the criminal justice community, from my fellow officers to prosecutors and defense attorneys, as well as the courts. I pledge my commitment to being as transparent as possible as we work to make improvements to the state's breath alcohol program and restore the public's trust. Thank you.
Appreciate that statement. I know that we're going to be handed a copy of the same because we don't have it as part of our record. And thanks for being candid, open, and honest with that statement about you're going to do your best to cure the defect, because you said it is the hallmark, and those are my words, of our justice system, the evidence that we rely on as prosecutors, defense lawyers, police officers, and judges that ultimately have the upper hand on what to do. So thank you, and thank you for these other documents, bringing them with us today. I'd like to have you demonstrate, before we get to the other side, exactly how this instrument works for the benefit of everybody on the committee. Just, you can give a brief synopsis and show us what the PBT does, portable breath test on the road, versus the chemical test inside the station, if you can.
Right. Excuse me. So the smaller instrument is the PBT instrument that the majority of law enforcement carries in the state. And that instrument is, again, used on, thank you, sir. This is used on the roadside, and it is, as you can see, very portable as in comparison to the Data Master. So once this device is deployed, then at that point, oftentimes the next step would be that official sample that would be taken that, based on statute, provides a breath sample, a blood sample, or a urine sample. So in the event that the officer chooses to request the breath sample, then he or she would take the individual to a facility that has that, the data master device. And then as it's calibrated, each officer is trained on how to use the device. It is not something that goes without training. You have to be certified on the device to be able to use it, and you implement the test. Upon completion of the test, there is a very specific piece of paper or a ticket that is generated that indicates the results, and then obviously that is included in paperwork that is ultimately passed on to the prosecutor's office and the court system.
Well, pretty good. Nice job.
Thank you, sir.
So I'm pulled over. You come up as a police officer, believe that the individual who was pulled over has been drinking by way of speaking to me, my eyes, whatever. And then at that point, you can request sobriety test. You can remove them from the car, heel to toe, which means walk in a straight line, touch your nose, dexterity test, all these different set of tests. And then subsequently, or at the end, you can ask them to take a PBT to get a read on blood alcohol, but it's not admissible in a court of law.
Correct.
Okay. If there's enough on the PBT and the failure of the sobriety test at roadside, then you can go ahead and put them in custody and bring them in because they're a threat to society of being on the road.
Yes, sir.
All right. Once they get to the station, then the chemical test, which is this machine here to my left, your right, is fired up to get a read with a little pink coupon, it's called, that's spit out of this machine to get the blood alcohol level of the individual.
Yes, sir.
If they refuse this test in the station, then 6 points can be applied to their driver's license and loss of license for up to 6 months. Correct?
Yes, there are additional issues.
Additional issues, we'll leave it at that for simplicity today.
Yes, sir.
In addition, you have a right as the officer to request of them to take a blood or urine test, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. You indicated that there's irregularities that you found with the audit. What were the irregularities so that we're all aware what those mean?
So there were two basic irregularities without going into the specifics of how the document, the report was actually fraudulently crafted. We have an irregularity in making sure that the technician met the 120-day window at which time they are supposed to touch each instrument. So that's the first irregularity that was repeated multiple times. The second issue are these reports that once they touch these instruments, they are then required to generate a report. That report is then sent to the Michigan State Police. It's these reports that we have identified the irregularities, anything from bad dates and times to alignment issues on the report. As you know, Senator, these tickets, these pink coupons that are generated are formatted in a very specific way. And so when you have letters or numbers that are not in line, that is another indication of that.
When you indicated, so that we're clear, 52 drunk driving cases, roughly, there's 203 instruments. And the question I have is, has there been an exhaustive audit of all these instruments that are within the state?
We are currently in the process of doing that. We have 6 trained MSP personnel who have the ability, based on training, to perform these calibrations. And so as we are able to obtain equipment for all 6 of these members to be out there testing, That is the plan, is to bring these, every single one of these devices back to what we know is a baseline.
Baseline or compliance?
Yes, sir.
And the instrument, even the manual, so everybody knows, has to have the calibration and service within the 120 days, because that's what's outlined in the manual.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I could go on and on, but I'm gonna want to open up for questions of the committee, because I think this is a learning process for us all. And at the end of the day, how many data masters, and that's what this is called, you said there's a 203 that the state police have in service? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Out of the 203, is there more data masters out there, or that's all of the data masters?
That's all of the data masters in the state.
So some of the counties that we all are in, may only have one data master that every agency brings the individual to take the test?
That is possible, yes.
Okay. And the company that is the third-party vendor with the state of Michigan, who is that company that services the data master that you rely on for compliance with the manual?
It's Intoximeters Incorporated.
Do you know approximately how much Intoximeters is paid by the state to keep up the certification of these machines?
The contract is $1.26 million.
1.26 million?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. And you're relying upon them to do their job as all of us would when we rely upon our people that we have here in the state to do their job?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This time I'm going to open up to questions. Senator Chang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Colonel, for your testimony and for your work to address the situation. This is a really helpful timeline. Thanks for providing it. I noticed that in January of last year, you mentioned that you created a new position, the technical leader, and then just this past December that you've begun the process of establishing a unit to oversee this program that'll include 3 technician positions to conduct maintenance and certification. Where are you in the process on both of those things? And can you describe a little bit more about what that oversight will look like and how often, and just a little bit more detail about that oversight?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. So, yes, as we have observed the technicalities of this particular instrument and the science involved in the analysis and using the instruments, we've made the decision that it really does need to come into our laboratory system, having very strong internal controls, which is exactly what caught this, particularly in line with our accreditation. There's a very high level of responsibility as the accrediting agency comes in and goes over our information. So the decision was made to hire a technical leader, which we did. That person is actually the exact individual who discovered these issues. As we started to discover the issues, we started to move in the direction of potentially bringing this in-house to increase the number of checks and balances. This situation that we currently have obviously has jump-started that, so we do intend to hire 3 technicians that will ultimately do what these 3 technicians are not doing, or at least 2 of these technicians are not doing. And we will also include our internal control auditor to validate data, processes, and procedures, and then also look for an external scientist to come in and again validate what we have. Now, that's all on top of the tight issues that we are going to have to address when we seek calibration accreditation through the accrediting agency that will ultimately result in very strong internal controls.
Just to follow up, when was the person hired, the technical leader? Was that person hired prior to these, the August cases that started?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, Senator Chang? Senator Vanderwall, and then Senator Irwin, you need some questions answered? Thank you. Senator Vanderwall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. Very similar to Senator Chang's, in what I caught from we feel that there's 2 technicians that may have fraudulently, and possibly 3. How many do they have, total technicians? Just 3?
Yes, sir, they just have 3 that have 3 different areas of responsibilities for the state.
Okay. And I guess, just so my clarification, how would they basically affect that report? How do they go in and, I'm gonna use the term fudge the lines a little bit to make it look better, or I guess I don't really understand that piece.
Right. So what it appears is that this is a traditional cut and paste, not a electronic cut and paste, but where they took, it appears as though they took some of the tickets, they cut them, and then they taped them back together in a format that closely resembled, but the data is critical on the sheets. And so if you know what you're looking for, the data, the times, these tests are, so every machine self-tests at 4 a.m. every Monday. And if it self-tests and there are any issues, then the machine will shut itself down, at which time the technician needs to go out. If it self-tests fine, then that's what these technicians are supposed to be validating. So there are very specific pieces of information that should be the same on every single report that comes in. The other problem that has been discovered is the fact that although we do receive original documentation, that documentation does not come to us as immediately as the documentation from the technician. That report that comes from the technician is essentially a scanned PDF file that then gets emailed to us. And so now the time-consuming aspect of this is to take all of the reports that were submitted by these technicians and compare them to the original documentation. So it is not possible for them to manipulate the generated tickets. So what they have generated is the initial report.
Thank you, Senator Vanderwall. Senator Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Colonel Gasper. I have a question about your official statement, paragraph 3. There's a sentence that is confusing me. Maybe it's because I don't understand the system well enough. The sentence is, while the discrepancies do not directly impact or deal with the results of evidential breath tests, it is concerning that it appears as though some certification records have been falsified. So my question is, are the results of these breath tests not used for evidence, or how is it that these discrepancies are not impacting the results of the evidential breath test? It would seem to me that the certification must be linked to the value of the evidence.
Yes, thank you for the question. That's an important question. The issue that we were attempting to address there was the fact that when the calibration is done, if the calibration is not done, that does not automatically mean that the test was inaccurate, but it could potentially be inadmissible because it's outside of the time period that it was calibrated. And so from that perspective, that test could be considered inadmissible. That would obviously not be for us to weigh in on that. That would be the prosecutor's office or the judges or the court system in the state. But from the perspective of that test, as I referenced earlier, that is not the only piece of information that validates or invalidates a drunk driving arrest.
So in other words, the lack of certification records could result in evidence being inadmissible and not available in court. Yet you're saying that the discrepancies don't directly or indirectly deal with the results. I mean, to me, this creates at least a impression in my mind when I read this sentence that the results weren't implicated. But in fact, if the results are unavailable to be used in court, they were in fact affected by the failures around certification. Is that fair?
They could be, definitely. Our intent was just not to speak for the prosecutors or the court system.
Thank you, Senator Irwin. Senator Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Colonel, for being here. So following up on Senator Irwin's remarks or questions, it doesn't suggest that the data master was not rendering the proper output. It was that we couldn't validate that based on the time that had elapsed from the last certification. Is that more or less true?
Yes, sir.
And do you suspect that this was done out of just laziness by the vendors that didn't care to go out and recalibrate it, so they falsified the records to indicate that they had when they truly hadn't?
That is what we suspect.
And it wasn't an intent to fraudulently rig the device, it was just more or less carelessness or laziness on their part to suggest that they had done something that they truly had not done.
Yes, sir.
How do we know with certainty going forward or retrospectively that other instances of this haven't occurred and that there's been this perhaps deviation or drifting away from the certainty of what is reported out of the machine? If we look at the records and say, okay, it's been validated every, I think you said 90 days, correct?
Every 120 days.
Every
yes, sir.
120 days. And we have a record that shows that, but if that's merely a paper document that we've already determined is not accurate, how do we know that that machine is now rendering the proper output if in fact the certification of that can't be truly counted on? There could be a gradual discrepancy that is stretched over time, if you will.
Right, so the process from prior to, we have no indication prior to the hiring of these two individuals, based on the work that MSP has done where they receive the reports from the technician and then they obviously review those reports for accuracy and then compare those to the original documentation too. So prior to the fall of 2018, there were no indications based on the analysis that was being conducted that there were any irregularities that were detected.
Okay. When the calibration is recertified or done, does the manufacturer deliver a sample that the machine is tested or verified against? So basically that when they do that, is it just a computer verification or is it an actual, like we have a sample that we're going to put through the machine, we know what the sample should read because the manufacturer delivered it that way, and we will gauge that against what the machine actually puts out?
Yes, sir, we're getting slightly out of my area of expertise, honestly. I'm not a scientist, but from what I understand, yes, it's a highly technical calibration that takes into account instrumentation and chemicals within the device, as well as even barometric pressure to identify whether or not that machine is calibrated correctly.
Okay. So there is a scientific, it's not just a computer like you turn it on, run a few things and it puts out, yeah, everything's testing fine, but in reality it could be, we have to know that whatever person breathing into that machine, the output of that is truly what their level of intoxication truly actually is.
Yes, sir.
And then, do we ever have instances where the data master and the blood tests do not align with one another?
I'm not aware of that. It is, I guess, potentially possible, but I'm not aware of any situations.
Okay. Wanted to ask you, if I may continue, Mr. Chairman. Of course, I'm sure you're well familiar that Vice Chair Chang and I have bills related to the Forensic Science Lab and Forensic Science Commission. I know your department's had pretty strong opposition to that. Do you feel that in light of these revelations that perhaps, an outside body having more authority in this matter could help alleviate these circumstances from occurring in the future?
In this particular situation, based on what I know of the proposed Forensic Science Commission, this situation would not have resulted in a difference because some type of entity, presumably the state police, would have had to bring this issue to the commission. So again, we would more or less be in the same situation of being reactive to the situation versus being proactive.
Okay. You may be familiar with the Criminal Defense Attorney Association, and Mike Nichols, one of their attorneys, has petitioned the governor to move the crime lab out of the state police based on what he considers to be not valid results and some, evidence that he uncovered that showed, a retesting of results that may have had a residual carryover effect. I don't know or understand all the science behind that, but have you kind of reviewed that or responded in some way?
Yes, I have reviewed it, and again, to get into the science of it, a little out of my scope and my expertise. What I will say is that from a perspective of the relationship, regardless of where the forensic science sits, they are always going to have a particular relationship with members of the criminal justice system because that's what they're doing. They're doing the criminal justice work for prosecutors and for defense attorneys and for the court system. So there will always be a particular relationship there. From a standpoint of the case with residuals, we are an accredited lab. We are, our results are and our standards are higher than the industry standard. Because we do hold ourselves in a very high regard to make sure that we are providing those lab services. All of our reports are completely transparent. Our processes are transparent, and we've provided the same documentation for decades that indicates how we sample, and the sampling of samples multiple times is within the industry standard, which is within accreditation, which is ultimately what is done around the world. So we do stand behind our strict internal controls and where we are with our accreditation.
So is there anything in that specific instance that was improper that was done, or are you saying you stand behind that, even that sample that was done 4 times and only 1 was reported or something to that effect?
Yes, sir. I completely stand behind it. We don't discard the samples. It's science, and it does speak for itself.
Okay. Lastly, this is something that's taken on an interest of mine. The governor, in the most recent budget, stripped out protections for employees that